Here at Young.Wild.Free Family Farm, and today I'm going to show you how to start your basic sourdough bread recipe. So there will be a series of videos that shows start to finish how to make a loaf of sourdough bread. This is going to be the first in that series. So what you're going to need to make this is your active starter. This was fed last night, so it's really wide and awake. You can see how bubbly it is. It's separating from the sides. So you want it to be active. You don't want it to be flat. If it's flat, you're going to need to feed it. So that's the first thing you're going to need. And then you're going to need filtered water, a bowl, a basic kitchen scale. You can get these on Amazon, they're pretty cheap. Unbleached flour. Make sure it's unbleached. If it's bleached, it will not rise nearly as well. And then your recipe. And optional things are a spoon. I almost always over pour my water, so this is for removing extra ingredients. And then a spatula for stirring if you don't want to use your hands. You're totally welcome to use your hands too, though. Okay, so to start, you're gonna put your bowl on your scale and you're gonna zero that. I always add my starter first, and we're gonna do 60 grams of active starter. See how stringy that is? I overdid it. So there's 63 grams in there, so you just take a little bit out. Really, it probably doesn't have to be exact, but I'm an exact person, so it would bug me if it wasn't. Also, it makes sure that you get consistent results from time to time, from one recipe to the next. Okay, so then you're gonna zero it out. Unless you like to do math, if you like to do math, you can do that too, but I zeroed it. So then you're gonna do 320 milliliters of room temp water. Fun fact, milliliters converts directly to grams, so I just leave my scale on grams because most of the time I forget anyway, so it stays that way. Okay, so 320. Once you get close, go slow with the water because a little bit goes really far. I'm 1 gram away. Okay, zero your scale again, and then we're gonna do 500 grams of unbleached flour. This, for me, is like 2 heaping cups of flour, usually. Well, that one wasn't heaping enough. Nor was that one. And I overdid it. Okay, there we go. Then to mix it, you're gonna wanna take it off of your scale. I don't know if you have to do that, but I worry that I'm gonna mess up the calibration if I mix it on top of it, so I don't. You'll notice that, I don't know what's happening with the cat in the room. There's salt in the recipe. I don't add salt at this point. If you add salt right now, you will not get nearly as good of a fermentation or a rise, so we'll add that later on. Then you can either use your hands to mix or you can use a spatula. I just find the spatula works better, and then I don't have to worry about washing sourdough off my hands because sourdough is really sticky. If you want to come in closer to see how this mixes together, I just kind of work around the edges of the bowl and bring the flour in. It gets kind of awkward to mix before it comes together. This is the point that it would be sticking terribly to your hands. So I just use the spatula. Just kind of mash it all together. If you have kids, they really love to do this part. They are not weirded out by the sourdough sticking terribly to their hands. In fact, it's one of their favorite things. It's also really good sensory play if you need that. Then it gets hard at this part. So at this part it's pretty dry, so you actually can use your hands without too much difficulty. That's usually what I do at this point, is pull up a sleeve and just kind of knead it until it's all together. And it's just gonna be a really rough dough in the beginning. All right, so once it's all together and all your flour's mixed in, then you are gonna cover this with a plate and you'll let it sit at room temperature, or if it's in the winter, pop it in your oven with just the oven light on for 30 minutes. And then in the next video, I'll show you our first stretch and fold. Hey guys, we're back with our sourdough starter. It has been sitting in a warm oven for 30 minutes now, and this is what she looks like. Very much the same as it was when we left 30 minutes ago. If you can hear the chaos in the background, don't mind, we have kids. Okay, so we're gonna do our first stretch and fold. Normally I do this at the sink, but for the ease of videoing, we're gonna do it here. So I have a glass of water because it's really sticky at this point. So you're gonna wanna get your fingertips just like a little bit wet, don't soak them. And then you're gonna reach down in, you might wanna get a little closer for this. So you're gonna reach down in underneath the bread and you're gonna stretch it up and out. This first one, it is not gonna stretch very far and it is still really sticky. As we continue to do these, it will get less sticky and it will have slightly more resistance. It'll hold together better, just in general, it will feel nicer, but that's okay, that's the first one. We do this for a number of reasons, but one of the main reasons is to introduce oxygen. Because there are living microbes inside this dough, they require oxygen in order to ferment the dough. Okay, and then just one more. So you do one on each corner essentially. Stretch it up like that and then fold it over. And that's it, that's our first stretch and fold. So this will get covered again. Wipe my hands off. This will get covered again with a plate. You always want to cover your dough before you put it in the oven or it will get a crust on top. So you put it back in the oven with the oven light on for 30 minutes. If it's summer and your house is already like 70 to 78 degrees, you don't have to put it in the oven to set it on the counter. But since it's still chilly, we're gonna put it back in the oven for another 30 minutes and then we'll come back and I'll show you the second stretch and fold. Hey guys, so we're back for our second stretch and fold. We just brought our sourdough starter out of the oven and it's starting to change. You can see that it's gotten a lot smoother. It looks more elastic, and to a semi-trained eye, you can tell that the fermentation process is underway. So at this point, I still wet my fingers because it is still a bit sticky, but I can now touch it without it sticking to my fingers. So that's good. All right, again, I normally do this next to the sink, but I'm not gonna film next to the sink, so. You get down under there again, and you're gonna stretch it up. It's much easier to stretch this time than it was the first time. It's starting to feel a lot more elastic. And I can now touch it without really having to worry too much about my hands getting sticky. And again, we're just gonna do the same thing. You do a stretch and fold just once on each corner. You kind of stretch it as much as you can. And then you get it back in the center of your bowl. That's what it looks like. And it's gonna go back in the oven again for another 30 minutes. After 30 minutes, we'll come back and we will take a look at what it looks like then. Hey guys, we're back. Our sourdough has come out of the oven. We are about to do our third stretch and fold. So I wanted to show you what it looks like. It is much, much less sticky now. It's getting some air bubbles in there. I don't know if you can see that, but that's an air bubble right there. And it's much less stretchy. One of the kids just turned on a video in the background and I didn't know what it was. Oh. Okay, so we're gonna get in here and we are going to stretch. See how much stretchier that is now? It's so much looser and more elastic. Okay, so we're back again. We had a bit of a breakdown laughing over the stretchy dough. Anyway, so we're back to our stretch and fold. I am now on the second side and it becomes so much easier. By the third time, the stretch is not nearly as difficult. The first one is my least favorite because it's still so sticky. And by the end of it, it's amazing. We'll do this 5 total times. So this time, a 4th time, and then a 5th time. By the 5th time, you will not even recognize it. So that's what it looks like. We're gonna go ahead and cover it up, and we're gonna put it back in the oven for another 30 minutes. Hey guys, we are back. It's time for our 4th stretch and fold. The dough is looking beautiful. My hands are looking dry. All right, so I might be able to get away with not dipping my hands in this, but it's so much easier to not mess with that. All right, as you can see, it is much softer at this point. It's starting to actually feel like a dough instead of just like some flour and water mixed together, which is awesome. That starter is working its magic. So we just do the same thing for around the outside. The last one is always a little bit harder because once you start messing with the dough, it builds tension in it. So that is what it looks like after the 4th stretch and fold. We're gonna pop it back in the oven, let it sit for 30 more minutes, and then I will show you what it looks like when it's done. Okay, so we have let it sit. This would be our 5th stretch and fold. I'm going to add salt at this point. So I said 5 stretch and folds. It's really 4 stretch and folds, and then on the 5th, the end of the 5th 30 minute rest, you add your salt. So you're gonna add 5 grams of salt. This is what your dough looks like at this point. You can tell it's starting to rise. It's much less sticky. And this is the point that we want to add our salt, and then we'll let it rise again. So I have a little bit of water and then 5 grams of good salt. Don't use like white table salt. I guess you can if you have to, but find a good salt. It makes a huge difference. And salt can be a great source of minerals. So just make it good for you. I just put mine in a little cup, and then you're going to pour this over the top, and the water helps this to mix in. Unfortunately, you can't not use your hand for this. So then you're just gonna take it and you just kind of squeeze and work the salt into the dough. Without the water, this just becomes a really gross, sticky mess. It sticks to your hands terribly, and you really can't ever mix that salt in well enough for it to not have salty bites. And that's not fun. So you just work this in, and then when you feel confident that it's pretty well worked into all of your dough, we're gonna cover it, put it back in the oven with the light on or on your warm counter for another 45 minutes. And at that point, it will be done with its first fermentation. Okay, that looks good to me. We're gonna pop it back in the oven, and when the 45 minutes has passed, then I will show you how we finish day 1 with our sourdough. Okay, so our sourdough has now sat for an additional 45 minutes, and it is ready for the shaping stage. So this is what it looks like now. It has some beautiful bubbles formed in it. It is just lovely, and it smells so nice right now. So in order to shape it, we are going to take some flour. I use this little sifter. It just keeps it from like clumping up in specific places, gets more even coverage. And then you are also gonna take your proofing bowl. If you don't have one of these, you can do it without, but I do recommend getting one. They're not really that expensive. I ordered mine on Amazon. It came with 2. So you get your bowl, and then you also get this fabric cover. You can omit the use of the fabric cover and just do it in the bowl, but I like the way the cover works. It creates a more even coating of flour. So then you're also gonna take your sifter, and you're gonna coat the inside of this as well. You don't have to go too heavy-handed, but you do want it to be covered or else it'll stick, and then it's lost. It's a lost cause. Okay, next you're gonna take your sourdough and pour it out. It's not terribly sticky at this point, but it will stick a bit. And then we're going to stretch it flat. It does help. It's just a little bit of flour. Don't go too crazy, but you want to be able to flatten it out. Doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be stretched out. Again, we're introducing oxygen into the loaf of bread because it's going to go into the refrigerator overnight, and we want to have as much of the surface in contact with oxygen now, since this is the last time the inside of the loaf will see oxygen. Okay, so once it's spread out nicely like that, you're going to fold your edges over, and then you're going to take this and kind of just roll it up like that. Now we are going to form it into a ball. We do that by pulling it towards us, rotating it, toward us, rotating. And it takes a little while to kind of get a feel for this. If it gets sticky, you can use flour, but use as little as is necessary. Now this is building the tension in the dough. It will help it keep its circular shape when you put it into the proofing basket and then bake. Do it gently, don't go really fast or you'll tear the top. If you tear the top, it's not the end of the world, but it looks a lot nicer if the top doesn't tear. And then once it kind of starts to hold its shape, it doesn't move out, you know that you're about done. Happy with that. Now on top you can see that there are some bubbles that have formed. That's a good sign. That means that it's fermenting well, it's releasing gases, and you'll get a nice like blistered crust on it. Then you take this and you flip it upside down just like that, and then we're going to cover this up with a towel, or not with a towel, you can use a towel, but I cover it with a plate just like that. And you're gonna put it into the refrigerator overnight, and then first thing in the morning you'll take it out, and I will show you tomorrow morning how I bake my dough. Good morning. So my sourdough has sat overnight, and now we are ready to score it and bake it. I have preheated my oven to 500 degrees. I always start that first because it takes a little while to get up that high. And now I'm gonna show you what the dough looks like. So our dough looks like that now. And we're going to take it and we're going to flip it. And then when you remove this, you want to be a little bit careful. You don't want to just pull it off really fast because you could rip the top. All right, so that's what the top of it looks like. And then we're going to score it. And I just score it kind of along the same lines that are already in it from the fabric. And you do want to go pretty deep with this. This score is going to be what allows steam to escape. And if you don't score deep enough, it will just split on its own. If you were to not score your dough, you would just get random split lines. And then I usually put some sort of little design over here in these empty spaces. These don't have to be as deep. This is more decorative than it is necessary. This razor knife came in the set that I purchased for my proofing baskets. All right, so that is the scored dough. And then you're gonna wanna take a cast iron enameled Dutch oven and oil the bottom of it. If you don't want to oil the bottom, you can also use a piece of parchment paper and just drop that in. It does make it slightly easier to take out, but I have found that I don't like having to go purchase parchment paper just for this. It feels a little bit wasteful to me, and also I like the way that the bread cooks on the bottom. So you just put a little bit on the bottom, and then you're just gonna lift this and set it in. So you get underneath it, lift it up, and just gently set it in and kind of tuck the edges under, just like that. And then we're gonna drop our oven temperature down to 450. Once it hits 500, we're gonna put this in at 450 for 30 minutes with the lid on. And then after the 30 minutes, we're gonna take the lid off, put it back in the same 450-degree oven for an additional 15 minutes, and it will be perfectly crusty and cooked all the way through. All right, so it is done baking. It is out of the oven. It looks lovely. If you get really close, you can hear it crackle. Maybe. No? All right, so we're gonna tip it out. Do this carefully. Your crock will be very hot at this point in time. And then you just put it onto a cutting board like that. And normally you would wait until this was completely cool to cut into it, but I'm gonna cut into it right now because we're having it with breakfast. So I will show you what the inside looks like. The bread is also very hot, so don't touch it. A serrated knife is really helpful. A bread knife would probably be more helpful, but I don't have a specific bread knife, so I just use a serrated knife. And be gentle when it's hot. Once it's completely cooled, the inside is quite strong, but when it is fresh out of the oven, you don't want to tear it too much. And there you go. And that is how you make a beautiful loaf of homemade sourdough bread. No yeast ever needs to be bought again.